So this session is about searching for off-campus housing. And this is part of our International Student Services webinar series. My name's Andrew Staples, and I am the International Student Success Coach. So my role is to help all international students with your transition into McMaster, as well as any challenges that you might have during your time while you are studying with us. And I'd like to invite our co-panelist Yufei and Zana to come on, and they will be able to introduce themselves. So Yufei, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So hi, everyone. My name is Yufei Zhang. I work at the School of Graduate Studies as the International Graduate Student Coordinator. So my role is to support the graduate level international students here. Nice to meet everyone.
Hey guys, my name is Zana Adolfo. I am working as the Program Support Assistant for the International Student Services. So I'm just here to help you guys out, and nice to meet you all.
Okay, excellent. So a little bit of housekeeping for this session. You're welcome to use the chat to sort of socialize and connect with each other. But if you have any questions about housing, we do ask that all questions are asked through the Q&A. We do have a lot of content to go through, but we will have some time at the end to do a Q&A session. So this is a reminder for any undergraduate or undergraduate exchange students who are joining us today. The application deadline for on-campus residents, and again, this is just for undergraduate students, closes on June 1st. And more information can be found through the housing website, and Zana is going to share that link in the chat. So this webinar series is presented by International Student Services, and so we are the department that is here to help all international students during your time here. So with your transition, we have lots of workshops for you, different social events. We also have one-on-one appointments and advising if you have any questions, immigration advising, and we oversee your UHIP health insurance. So to begin this webinar, in Canada, what we do is something called the land acknowledgement. And this is acknowledging the traditional territories of the land that McMaster is located on. So McMaster University is located on the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. A wampum belt are beads that are bound into strings, which narrate the Haudenosaunee histories, traditions, and laws. So this wampum agreement, the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, was created to bind the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and to the Great Law of Peace. And so if you can picture a dish, that represents the land where we all work, live, and study on. And the spoon represents the idea of sharing the land and peace. So today we are going to talk about who you are going to live with or who you want to live with, the different types of housing that's available, sort of average rental prices, where to live in Hamilton, how to do your search, and a little bit of safety and well-being as you do your search. And then we will end with a Q&A. So there are some common terms that you might encounter through this process or that we might talk about today. So rent, this refers to the payment that you would be making towards occupying your rental unit or your property. Utilities, this refers to electricity, water, waste disposal. So that's usually an additional bill or it might be an additional cost that you have to pay in addition to your rent. You might see postings that say furnished or unfurnished. And so this would indicate whether there's any furniture included in the rent. Now, things like a refrigerator and a stove, those things are going to be included anywhere, even if a place that is unfurnished. But if it's furnished, it might include like a sofa or a bed or a table, things like that. Co-ed living is when there is more than one gender living in the same accommodation. A sublet is when you are leasing a property that somebody else has already rented. So let's say somebody rented a room somewhere, they no longer want to stay there, and they're looking to sublet their lease. So you would be essentially taking over that lease for somebody else. And then a lease. So this is a legal contract between two different parties. So one party, which would be you, the tenant, is that you are signing to stay with either a landlord or the owner of that property. And so it's really important to recognize that this is a legal document. And so you need to read it carefully before signing to know what it is that you are signing on to. Landlords are required to use the Ontario Standard Lease. However, we do know that some landlords do not use that. In this document, it would say if utility costs are included, if there's any additional fees that you might have to incur. It might reference deposits. Typically, a deposit would be your last month, as well as maybe a check for your first month. It is important to know that you cannot terminate a lease early. There are some exceptions, but when you do sign this, it does generally mean that you are committed for the duration of the lease. And it's also important to know that you as a tenant, you have lots of different rights that are available to you. But one thing that's really important is that you do have the right to privacy to your space. Okay, so I am going to hand it over to Zana, who's going to talk a little bit about moving to Canada for the first time.
Hey guys, thank you, Andrew. So moving to Canada can be quite daunting, especially if you haven't been to a different country before. And some things that are very important to keep in mind are like finding a community where you belong. There are a lot of really good resources on campus to be able to do that. Always come connect with us. I'm an international student myself, and a really great community where I feel like I belong is here with fellow international students on campus. Also keeping in mind that living far away from your parents and your home, things are going to change. So good things to keep in mind before coming is to learn how to cook before you come, learn how to do laundry, learn how to clean. All of these are skills that will be very useful to you once you're living here off campus and taking care of yourself. Practicing a healthy living style is also important, making sure that you have a schedule that you keep to, that you're sleeping enough, that you're eating healthy, that you're taking time to exercise, taking time to go outside, things like that. And then keeping in mind that living by yourself versus living with people and roommates, that's an important thing. Isolation is something that can happen quite easily when you're in a new country and you're not surrounded by other people. So making sure that you have, like I said before, a community where you belong, a place where you can find social interaction and things like that is very important. And then when you're moving, it's good to keep in mind who you want to live with. Sometimes we're so focused on just finding a place to live that we don't think about the people that we will be living with, because that has a really big impact on your experience here. So looking at sleep schedules where one roommate is awake at 7 a.m. and wants to sleep at 10 p.m., whereas another roommate is awake at 2 p.m. and goes to sleep at 4 p.m. Or cleanliness, where the one leaves the dishes in the sink and the other one wants to wash them right away. Or cooking, where one roommate always cooks at home, likes to cook fish, pork, spicy food. So there are a lot of fragrances happening, whereas the other roommate eats mostly takeout or has a vegan diet. It's important to keep in mind what your comfort level is with people's different habits, including having guests over. Maybe one roommate doesn't like to have guests over and wants a quiet space, whereas the other person wants to have lots of guests, wants to have parties, things like that. If you don't find someone who matches those interests, it can cause a lot of tension. And then other habits to keep in mind is also drinking, smoking, things like that. If one roommate wants to do that and other roommates don't, it can be quite uncomfortable. So keeping this in mind, if you don't have a roommate or someone in mind, McMaster has this really cool thing called MacMatch, where it's an online platform where students can connect to each other to find housemates for off-campus living. So you go into the link where you create a profile. I'm sharing the link now. So you can just go there, create a profile, and then you answer about 26 questions on your living preference. And then you get matched with people who have several similar preferences to you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Sana. And so there are lots of different types of housing that are available that might be quite different from where you're coming from. So probably the most common type of housing around McMaster is what we would define as a student house. And so this would be a traditional family home that has now been maybe adjusted or adapted to accommodate students. And so this is where you're typically sharing with a number of students. So it could be 4, 8, sometimes we hear of 10 or 12 people in a house. In this kind of living situation, you would have a private bedroom, and then you would be sharing a partially furnished living space and kitchen with everybody else. There would also be a shared bathroom. Typically, these are less expensive because it is more of a shared space. Most of the houses around McMaster are fairly old. So the community around here was built about 80 years ago. So most of the houses are from that era. However, a lot of them are updated and modernized. With a student house, you would typically be signing a 8 or a 12-month lease. Within a student house, there's different types of rooms that you might see posted. So some might be in a basement. And so as you can see on the picture on the left, a basement typically will have some form of window, but it's going to be quite small because much of where you are living is going to be below ground level. You could also find rooms that are on the ground or upper floors. Or you might find some that are at the very top floor, which might be referred to as an attic. So basement spaces, again, you may have less sunlight. They might be a little bit cooler in the winter, but they also are cooler in the summer, which has its advantages. Upper floors or attic spaces can generally be hotter in the summer and also could be a little bit colder in the wintertime. So just things to kind of keep in mind as you are conducting your search. Another type of house is what we'd call sort of a private student apartment. So these are not affiliated with McMaster. These would be something off campus, privately run, but these would be apartments that only students live in. And so typically they would be either a single room or a double room. And you would have your own private bedroom, which is typically furnished. So that makes it move-in ready, which is a lot easier, especially for international students who are arriving. And then you would have a shared sort of living and kitchen space. These buildings often have a roommate matching service. And typically these are going to be 12-month leases, which includes everything. So it would often include internet, electricity, everything would be included in that rent. And so there are 2 different apartments in this style. One is located to the west of campus, and we also have another one located downtown. Then a more traditional apartment. And so in an apartment building, this would be, it could be a 1-bedroom, it could be a studio, it could be a 2 or a 3-bedroom. in this kind of a building, you would be living maybe with students. There might be families renting apartments, working professionals. And so this would not be furnished. You would have your own private space. So obviously, if you have a 1-bedroom or if you're living by yourself, you would have your own bathroom. But if it's a 2 or 3-bedroom, you would be sharing that bathroom with others. These could be high-rise apartments, so 10, 15, 20 stories high, or they could be low-rise apartments. It could be even what we would call a duplex, which would be like a house that has been split into 2, where there's maybe one apartment on the top floor and one apartment on the lower floor. And typically these are going to be a 12-month lease. You might also find a room in a landlord house. And so this could be like a student house, or it could be similar to an apartment. But essentially you would be renting a room in a house that the landlord or the family of the owner is living in. And so with these, they might be furnished because the landlord is also living there. You would have your own private bedroom, but then everywhere else would be shared. If it's a room with a landlord, there might be some more flexibility in terms of lease length. So it could be 4, 8, or 12 months. But it is really important that all of the other ones that I had talked about, your sort of rights, you are covered under what's called the Residential Tenancies Act, which is something that protects you as a renter. But if you are living with a landlord, the Residential Tenancies Act does not apply to you. So in terms of prices, prices in Canada, it's not unique to Hamilton, but prices in Canada have been increasing a lot over the last few years. So a room in a student house might be anywhere between $500 to $800. Plus, you might have to pay other things like utilities or internet costs in addition to that. A 1-bedroom apartment, the average price in Hamilton right now, I think, is about $1,800 per month. But you might find some things lower or higher. And then the private student residence that I had mentioned, you're looking at a range between $800 and $1,200, inclusive of everything. So with your prices, you may have to pay a key deposit. That will depend on where you are, but it might be around $150. And then you might also be asked to pay for the first and last month's rent when signing the lease, which would be that initial deposit. So some other expenses, this workshop really is focused on housing and how to find housing. So we are having another webinar in August, which is going to cover more about budgeting, opening of a bank account in Canada, and those kind of things. So I encourage you to join us for that one on August 2nd. But just so you have sort of a general idea as you're working out what your budget might be. Eating out once a week at an inexpensive restaurant might be around $75 a month. Groceries, this is really going to range, what on diet, if you're vegetarian or vegan, or if you eat meat, because meat can have a significant factor, but it might be around $400, $450 per month. Utility bills could be around $140 or more per month. And so if you are in a student house and you are sharing that, again, that might be something that is split between 4 or 5 or more people. So one of the advantages of living with others is that some of these costs you can split. Internet, depending on the type of internet you are getting, could be between $50 to $150 per month. Phones, which is probably the biggest shock for students, are quite expensive in Canada. Probably the absolute cheapest with almost no data at all would be about $40 a month. Or if you need a lot of data, it could get up to $100 or more per month. So again, factor all of this in. because rent is obviously a significant part of your budget, but it is not, you are obviously going to have other expenses that you have to sort of factor into your decision. And so I'd like to invite Zana back to talk about the different locations in Hamilton where you could live.
Yeah, so just like you need to factor in your budget and other expenses that you would have, knowing where to live is another thing that's important to think about. So think about what type of environment will contribute to your academic success. What do I want to gain personally from my experience at McMaster? What is my financial situation like? And to what extent am I prepared to go into debt in order to accomplish these goals? So there are several places or neighborhoods that are common for students to live in. Here is an example of some of them. McMaster University is there in the middle, and then around it we have Ainsleywood North, Ainsleywood, and Westdale. These are very popular for students to live in. They're relatively close to campus, which makes it quite accessible, and a lot of students live here, so you feel like you're kind of living in a student town. It's students live close to each other, so it's easy to go over to someone's house or to meet up and hang out together, especially in Westdale Village or other places nearby. Then we also have a lot of students who live in downtown. There are several neighborhoods there. This is slightly further away from campus, but still accessible with the bus routes. So it's not as much living in like a student town, but you do get the Hamilton downtown experience if you're looking for somewhat more of a city experience. And then most students, so those are the neighborhoods that most students live in. There are lots of houses that are a 15 to 20-minute walk from campus, but those are very competitive to get. Another option is to get a house that's not too far away from the bus stops, because the buses tend to run quite regularly. So you could still get to campus if you just use Google Maps to estimate the commute time from your house. And then it's also important to look at where your house is located in its surroundings. So finding a place that's close to stores like grocery stores, restaurants, pharmacy, dollar stores, things like that.
Great. Thanks so much, Sana. So as you start to begin your search, it is really important to recognize that finding a house is very, very competitive, especially as Sana had mentioned, the Westdale Ainsleywood area. And so what I would suggest that you do is at least start searching for housing as early as possible. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to sign something, but at least be looking to see what is available, know what kind of options you have. So it is most common for at least student housing to have a lease that follows the academic year. So that would be typically a lease that's from September to August or from May to April. And so, you know, most students, if they look at their list, I want to be walking distance to campus, I want something that is cheap, I want to be close to a grocery store. And so obviously those are the type of places that are going to be in high demand. And so, you know, what I would suggest is have kind of a needs list, or sort of a checklist of what you want, but don't necessarily focus on finding that perfect place for you, because it is really, really competitive. And I don't want you to kind of wait to find that perfect house and losing out on some ones that might not be as perfect for you. And so what I would suggest is we're going to go into how to start searching, but I would suggest start your searching as quickly as possible. Again, just so you can kind of see what the environment is like. So McMaster has a MAC off-campus housing website, which Zana has put in the chat. And so this is a way that landlords can go and post. And these would be landlords who are specifically looking for McMaster students. And so a lot of these would be, in closer proximity to campus. And these would be accommodations that would be suitable for students, staff, or faculty. And so when you go to that website, you can log in, and it will give you the option to kind of search, and you can filter based on the type of property that you're looking for. So, if you're looking for a shared accommodation, a whole apartment just for yourself, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms. And then when you click on each individual listing, it should show you some pictures. It'll have the cost per month and all of the details, like when they are looking for occupancy to start. So this would be one way to do your search. Another would be using Facebook. And so Facebook has different student groups. And so these would be groups that are not affiliated with McMaster. It might be students have created a group. And so you can certainly look on those groups to see if there is anything that is available, or you could use Facebook Marketplace. And so with Facebook Marketplace, they will have a section for property rentals. You would just have to search for Hamilton. And so this is where, a tool like Google Maps becomes really helpful, because if you are searching on Facebook, this is where anybody who's looking for rent would be using. So these properties might not just be specific to students. So if you find something, I would suggest that you use Google Maps to see how long does it take you to get to campus. Because if you have to take 3 buses, then it's going to take you an hour and a half to get to campus. But the rent is really cheap. You would have to weigh based on your priorities. Is it your financial need versus your time requirement? So just keep that in mind when you are searching through websites like Facebook. And then there are some other more local websites that you could use. So Kijiji is a very popular one. Kijiji is an online marketplace where you can also find, used furniture or really used anything. It's an open marketplace, but they do have rentals. Rentals.com, as well as rentseeker.ca are very common websites that you can use, and Zana has put those in the chat. So I do recognize that, some students will not feel comfortable signing a lease until you've actually visited that property. So it is one of the challenges that international students face when you are, coming to Canada for the first time. So some students often ask, can I find temporary housing? So McMaster does not offer any temporary housing any later than, I think, I'm going to say August 12th, I think might be the last day that you could potentially stay in the McMaster hotel, which they call it. And that's because we have thousands of first-year undergraduate students that are moving in starting in August. So there is no temporary accommodations on campus if you are arriving mid to late August or early September. And so if that's the case, you would have to look at temporary housing off campus. And so it is really important to remember that these housing costs can add up really, really quickly. So if you are in it for a week or a couple of weeks, that might be equivalent to several months' rent, because you would be staying in an Airbnb or a hotel. So what I would recommend, that if you are looking to find temporary housing before you arrive, try to find something that has cooking facilities, because at least if it has a little kitchen or a fridge, you can at least keep your food expenses down while you are continuing your search. And so Zana has put in the chat a list of accommodations that are available within Hamilton. Again, use Google Maps to see in terms of the proximity between that hotel or the Airbnb and getting to campus. And so when you are doing your search, it is really important to be aware that unfortunately people do scam people, and there are a lot of fraudulent postings. And so this is something that, especially as an international student where you can't physically view the property, it becomes a bit of a challenge when you are searching for properties. And so generally some tips in terms of how to maybe spot a scam or a fraudulent post is that if the online presentation is really poor, the pictures don't show you anything inside, it's only the outside, or if they have an address and then you Google that address and it doesn't look like the building that you are trying to rent, that might be a good flag that this is a scam or a fraudulent post. If they are asking for really huge deposits, so if they say, the rent per month is only $600, but you need to pay a $3,000 deposit, that is not common practice in Ontario. So again, that is probably a sign that it might be a scam or a fraudulent post. If the person you're communicating with is not willing to answer some specific detailed questions, or what I recommend for students to ask the landlord to do, to just say, hey, I'm an international student, I can't physically come and look at the property. Can we arrange for like a Zoom call where you just do a quick walkthrough, so I can actually see what that property looks like? Because someone might post a picture of a property that they took 10 years ago, but the property hasn't been painted, it hasn't been upkept, and so the pictures that you're seeing aren't an actual reflection of that property itself. So trying to be very very communicative with the landlord and trying to say, hey, can we do a walkthrough? That can be a good way to ensure that it is not something that is a scam. And then I'd also say, just generally use your intuition. If it is, a brand new apartment and everything looks absolutely great and it is right beside campus and it is only $400 a month, and the landlord is saying, I've got lots of people waiting, I need you to send me money to hold your spot, it's probably either too good to be true or the landlord's being a little bit pushy. Use your intuition and say, what, if I'm not comfortable following up with this, just don't do it. It's better to protect yourself. Every year, unfortunately, we do have students, not just international students, but all students do get scammed through this. So, really do suggest that you start your search early, at least so you can see what is available, what kind of posts are, are real posts. So when you do begin your actual search, you have a little bit of background to make a more informed decision. So there are also some other things that you should be aware of prior to you moving in. So what we recommend that you do is make an arrangement to meet with your landlord to receive your keys. Some landlords might just say, I'll leave the key in a lockbox and you go, but I would suggest that you meet with the landlord or the property manager as you move in, because this allows you to actually do a walkthrough of the property and document any existing damage before you or as you're moving in. So when you move out, you aren't blamed for any existing damage. So, if there is a big scratch on a kitchen counter or a dent in a door or something like that, you don't want the landlord to come back to you as you're moving out to say, hey, you caught this. So do a little walkthrough, make note with your landlord of any existing damage, so you are not going to be responsible for that. You also want to know what your responsibilities are as a tenant. So most likely you will need to be disposing of your garbage, composting, and recycling. What day do you have to do that? When do you put that out? You'll want to have a discussion about what your responsibilities are, and hopefully some of this is in the lease, but are you required to shovel the snow? Are you required to cut the grass? Are you required to do any other kind of yard work as you're renting this property? You want to know where is mail delivered, and also really important, understand how the appliances work, because maybe a stove or an oven is a little bit different in Canada than it is from back home. And so you want to make sure that you're fully aware how to use that. How do I use the air conditioning? How do I use the furnace? Just to make sure that you understand how everything is as you move in. And so even if you have a furnished place, most likely you will have to buy your own sheets, beddings, towels, and things like that. So some students, depending on how big your suitcase is and how much other stuff you are bringing, some students opt to wait until you get here to buy that. What that might mean is that, if you don't arrive until evening time or nighttime on your first night, you might not have sheets or bedding on your first night, but then, the next day you could go to a store and pick that stuff up. We also do recommend that you always lock your doors and windows. Especially, if you leave to go out anywhere, you always want to make sure your windows and doors are locked. You never want to invite anybody into your property if you do not know who they are. This includes anybody who might identify as, hi, I'm here to look at your hot water heater, or I'm here to fix something. Your landlord would be responsible for any kind of upgrades or repairs, and your landlord should let you know ahead of time if somebody is coming to make that repair. You want to make sure that your house has working smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors. So again, when you meet your landlord and do a walk around, just ask them to ensure that those are working. You do not want to overload any electrical outlets or extension cords. So, sometimes if you're renting a room in a house, you might have, a laptop, maybe you have a hair dryer, your phone charger, maybe you buy a kettle. You don't want to plug all of that into one electrical outlet at one time, because you run the risk of maybe overloading that circuit and blowing a fuse or something like that. So, again, you could talk to your landlord in terms of how many outlets can I use? If I, can I use a kettle and a microwave? Can they be on at the same time? Or if that's something that you should be doing separately. If this is the first time living by yourself, living alone, and you have never cooked before, please be very cautious. Always be with the stove when you are cooking. Don't set something and walk away, because you want to make sure nothing is catching fire, or there isn't grease or anything like that splashing. And then the other thing to be aware of is bed bugs or any other kind of pests or critters. So sometimes large apartments, they may have bed bugs inside the property. So one thing that you could always do is, before you sign a lease or before you enter, you could just Google, like, does 123 Main Street, I don't know if that's a building or not, but you could just Google that building and bed bugs, just to see if it has a history of having anything. And then also know that if there's any other pests or critters like mice or anything like that, it is, the landlord's responsibility to take care of this. So if you move in, everything is great, but then suddenly, in the wintertime, maybe you hear some scratching in the walls, or you see a mouse running across the floor, let your landlord know, and it is their responsibility to take care of that kind of stuff. If, hopefully you never have to use these resources, but if you do, and there's any kind of dispute either between you and a roommate or between you and the landlord, please know that there are supports that are available to help you. So the first thing you should first person you should talk to is always your landlord or your property manager if there's any issues. But if there are any other concerns, or your landlord's not being responsive, or maybe there's something questionable about your lease, you're not too sure what to do, Hamilton has a free legal clinic, which is the Hamilton Legal Clinic, and they do have individuals that specialize in housing disputes. So that is a great resource just to have. Hopefully you don't need it, but just in case, you can connect with them. And then the Ontario province has also a great resource just in terms of renting and what your rights are as a tenant. And then, of course, if you do have questions, you can always reach out to us. And, if we don't know the answer, we can outsource to some additional resources. Okay, thanks everybody. I hope this was helpful. Wish you the best of luck in your search. And again, if you do have other questions, please feel free to email us, and we're happy to assist. We'd look forward to seeing you when you arrive in August and September. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Take care.